a healthcare stream at District 3. I'm also a senior coach there with many years of experience in building startups, running them, and working in the medical industry. And we have here Phil as well. Phil, if you want to present.
Good afternoon. I'm Philip Thompson. I'm the new venture associate for healthcare at D3, and I help startups make connections with clinicians, industry, and the rest of the ecosystem to get your business on the right track.
Do we have results of the poll just so we know? Okay. So most of you are either not familiar at all or familiar a bit with business models, and this is good because that's the audience we were aiming at. And so we will start, right, Jake, unless you have something else you want to add?
No, that's great. Thank you very much. Maybe you could just mention that for people, I think you're going to mention what District 3 is and how it's accessible to everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. Just I'll share my screen. Okay, so let's begin. As Jake mentioned, we don't have a lot of time, so we're sort of gonna be running through topics that we typically would spend months with teams to develop. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We will be reading them, and some of them we'll be able to answer during the session. Others, we can help you later on address these issues. We'll be focusing, as Jake mentioned, on the business side of your proposal. Just a few words about who we are. District 3 is an innovation hub that belongs to Concordia, but has always been open for the whole Montreal-wide innovation ecosystem. So we have a lot of teams that are coming also from McGill and other universities. We focus mostly on early stage, so you're never too early to come and ask for our help. And we focus on specific streams, and one of them is healthcare stream, and that's the stream I'm leading. We're pretty big. We have at any given moment around 60, 70 teams at D3 that we're working with, and teams stay with us sometimes for several years. So we adapt the help we give to the stage that you're at. But we also even provide help for people maybe like you that haven't yet decided that they want to jump into the world of startups, that you want to explore entrepreneurship. And so we have even programs that are specific for people that are still in the academia. And all our services are free. We don't take anything, equity or IP or anything like that. Here are some of the kind of services that we're providing. What I'm running you through now today is something that we would do in the validation program, and it's a 3-month program. So, don't feel like you're supposed to understand everything from just one workshop, okay? And you're very welcome if you want to apply for the validation program. It's just a much bigger effort to go through it. So let's jump right into the workshop. And what we're trying to do today is sort of explain to you the basics of how you should be thinking of the business side of your proposal, and provide you a tool that hopefully will help you sort of put everything in a framework that makes sense. We'll have another workshop on March 5th, where we'll focus more on other elements of the business plan that we're not focusing. We don't have the time to focus on today, like more of the financials and quantifying the market size and competitive analysis and stuff like that. Okay, so in preparation for your proposals, I don't know how many of you thought of the brilliant idea of actually looking at the video of the winners from last year. Raise your hand if you did. I'm not seeing many hands, so I'll assume that most of you have not seen it. So I want to quickly run you through it, because This is a good example of the topics that we're going to cover today. So just to give you from the get-go sort of a broader understanding of why, how all the pieces eventually come together. And I'll attempt to do this. Phil, are we saying the right thing?
Press and good competition with it.
No.
So
you're not seeing?
No, I think you might have to share your the screen showing the video. So maybe switch.
You're not seeing any of it?
No, I think you have to unshare and share a different section of your screen, like your probably your Google Chrome.
Are you seeing it now?
Yes, I believe so.
Again, we're competing for 2 prizes, as I mentioned earlier. It's my pleasure to introduce GyroClear, who will be presented by Aidan Reich.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Lachapelle. So today I'll be introducing GyroClear to you. So you might be wondering why I'm starting with a Formula 1 racing car during a clinical innovation pitch. Well, I'll only explain why shortly. For now, I'll introduce to you the observation we had while spending a few weeks at the Montreal General Hospital. We noticed a recurring problem that happens during laparoscopic procedures. So as you can see here in this clip, the camera is slightly blurry. And so the surgeon has to remove it from the body, clean it with a sponge or a towel. Upon re-entering into the body, you'll notice due to temperature differences that the camera will fog up, as we can see here.
So
and all this results in a prolongation of the operation. And so to put all of this into perspective, in 2019, over 4.8 million laparoscopic procedures were performed in the US alone. When we spoke to surgeons, 13 out of 14 of them shared the same opinion as us and wanted to find a solution to this problem. And so as promised, I'll come back to the F1, where it's because on the lens. And so F1, having some of the greatest engineers and constantly pushing the boundaries of innovation, developed this device that encapsulates the camera and has a spinning lens, allowing for constant clear images despite the rain. As you can see, in the 2018 Brazilian Grand Prix, we had a really crisp image despite all the rain they suffered from that day. So why not inspire ourselves from these F1 technologies? That's what we did at GyroClear. Our novel device aims to set a new standard for minimally invasive intra-abdominal and thoracic surgeries with its innovative design. As we can see here, it's a protective sleeve that would slide onto a laparoscope or rigid endoscope. And as we zoom in at the tip of it, we can see that the lens would be spinning, creating centrifugal force, allowing to instantaneously remove debris such as blood. A study has shown that surgeons lack proper visibility 43% of the time. And so our device would deliver that constant clear visibility 100% of the time, allowing surgeons to operate safely around critical anatomical structures. And so we'd be able to increase patient outcomes as well as decrease the...
Okay, so I'll just go back to the slide. I'm in the wrong place.
We're seeing a blank screen. There we go.
Okay.
You got it.
So what I wanted to draw your attention to, which first of all, the best advice I can give you is go watch the finals. It's a video. There's a link on this presentation. There's a link on the CLIC website, and it's a very good place to start with to understand what is the type of outcome that is expected of you for your proposal. But another point that I want to address here is that if you take that presentation and break it down into its elements, that's what we're going to be covering today on the business side of things. But I don't know if you noticed, but the part where they're explaining the actual product is a very, very short part of the presentation. Most of it is around the business narrative. And so today, that's what we're going to be focused on the business model. So what is a business model? Maybe one way to present it, it's a strategic way of how you build an organization that can create value and can create and deliver value to the customers. And it's always done in the context of the ecosystem that this organization is living in, right? We will teach you an relatively easy tool that's called the business model canvas. And the business model canvas is meant only to represent 9 elements that are crucial for your business model, it's just a tool that will allow you to show on one simple page all your assumptions that you're going to be testing and strengthening over time to build your business model. There are other elements that are not included in the business model canvas that are important for your business plan, and some of them we'll discuss later on. Each part of the business model canvas is not a standalone element, right? It's a piece of a puzzle. So if you change one piece of that puzzle, then you're probably affecting the rest of it. So all of it together is your business model, okay? And the pieces are interlinked. This business model is not a static thing. You start with what you know today, and over time, when teams actually build their startup and their business, they slowly gain more insight. They learn things that they didn't know that they didn't know, and circumstances change. So this whole business model is something that evolves over time. It's not a static. So if you're asking yourselves today, well, how do I know what will be in a year from now? You don't, but whatever you're putting in the business model canvas is the assumptions that you're making today, and you need to make sure that the whole picture makes sense with the assumptions that you have today. And if not, you're going and sort of digging deeper into the elements that don't make sense. Startups typically focus on one business model. You know, larger companies sometimes have more than one, but startups can't afford to focus on more than one. Okay, so the business model canvas itself is made out of 9 elements, as you can see here. I won't have time to go over all the elements in depth in this workshop. What I am going to be focusing a lot on is the duo of customer segments and value propositions, as that's the foundation to your business model. All the rest of the elements in the canvas are depending on you honing in who are my customers and what is it that I'm bringing them. So again, just to remind yourselves, this is something that's evolving, right? You're going to use that as a sort of a depository for your plan right now, but this is something that you're going to over time get more information and improve, and the business model, and constantly update as a tool. So let's start with the value propositions and customer segments. As I said, this is super fundamental for your presentation. Phil, are there any questions so far that you think I should address?
No questions on the chat yet.
Okay. Anything else that you want to add, Phil?
I'll have a few comments related to the value prop, but you can start and introduce the topic.
Okay, so the most important thing to remember about the value proposition is that you're not describing your innovation in it. It's or you're not talking about the features of your innovation. You're focusing on the problems of your customers. So obviously, problems are linked to who's the customer, right? And if you remember from the part that you did see in the presentation of GyroClear, that's how they started their presentation, right? They focused on what is the problem that they identified with surgeons, because solutions can depend, you need to figure out first what's the problem before you're honing in with your solution to make sure that you're addressing the right problems, right? When we're talking about problems, and we're also looking into unmet needs, right? Because some of you need to be thinking of these problems in context of what is already out there, right? To address gaps that are in the market. You don't want to be building a business plan around products that you know, the market already has solutions for, right? You want to focus on gaps in unmet needs and problems that are not solved today in a satisfactory way. You want to focus on what your solutions might be bringing as a benefit for the customers. Again, describing what it does is not the same as honing in on what is in it for the customer, and why is it that they would be willing to pay money for your solution. So here are some examples, basic ones. You know, we're saving time. We can save money. We can improve recovery time, improve effectiveness or efficiency. And in general, in clinical innovation, typically the value propositions will be falling under one of these three categories, right? Enhancing patients' outcomes, or enhancing patients or staff experience, and enhancing efficiency and reducing costs for the healthcare system. But the specifics, obviously, for each innovation are crucial in that context. One more point to remember: it's not enough for you to say, well, I'm a clinician, that's the problems I have, and here are the solutions that I'm offering. You need to strengthen your proposal with support that you can get by validating it with external either clinicians or other market stakeholders, okay? So your own perspective is not enough, because you need to build a business model that can scale, that can sell to a lot of people. Phil, you want to jump in with any comments?
Yeah, if you move to the next slide, I think that'll set my point up nicely. What many of you will encounter as you start thinking about developing your startup and your business model is that the concept of value proposition is foundational to your startup. And all too often, and I'm the first one to declare myself guilty on this, because I've been through it, we skim over the value proposition. We think we know, we assume we know, but it's not that simple. What I did here on this slide is I pulled out a really easy formulation for you to describe your value proposition. And what you'll find is, as most of you are scientists, is that this is essentially your first hypothesis that you need to prove out. But you also have to kind of prove out each of the variables. The first one is, who do you help? Have a clear and concise description of your target customer segment. We're going to get into customer segments in the next section, but it's absolutely essential that you circumscribe what type of customer you're going to target, and have an essence of an understanding of what common problem do those target customers share, and that's a critical point. The second one is the benefit to your solution needs to be significant in value, and value can take on many different variations, but it's the benefits that your customer segment will be deriving from your solution. So you have to turn it around and not think of what you're offering, but what your customers will be deriving as value from that solution. And we can talk about examples as we go on. And later here for the next one, by doing what is your point of differentiation. And this also is a critical aspect, because you need to be different from what the competition is or what the current status quo solutions are. And so if you stick to this formulation, it'll be a good base for you to start off with, but think that this is in constant evolution, and it needs to be proven out using outside opinions and interviews and people that you'll meet that will validate this information for you. So I just wanted to highlight that, because it's a critical component of your business plan.
Thank you, Phil. So I'll move next to the customer segments, which is a element that is paired with the value propositions, right? Now, when we're talking about customer segments, we're not talking about demographics. We're not talking about women between the age of 25 and 30. We're talking about target customers that sort of belong to the same group because they have they have the same problem and they're thinking of it from the same perspective, right? So a good way to sort of define if a group is a real customer segment, anyone that's in that group should be a good reference point for anyone else in that same group for your product, right? So because they're living in sort of in the same circumstances that will define their problems and what you can provide them as benefits. Here are some examples. They're not, you know, it really depends on the model, and these are things also that change. Sometimes you find that a customer segment is too broad and you need to make it narrower. Sometimes it's too narrow and you can include a couple of other segments in it and it still makes sense. But this is something that you're going to have to again, pay a lot of attention to how narrow, how broad you want to go. And you would need to consider, because you are in the clinical innovation and the healthcare system is a bit more complex than just a regular consumer market, that there are several stakeholders that might not be directly customers. If we define a customer as the entity or the person that is paying for your product, then surgeons might not be your customers, but they are certainly a very important stakeholder if the innovation that you're building is meant to be used by them, right? So there might be several customers that you need to address in that same business model, right? Here, I just try to sort of bunch things together for you for how to think of these stakeholders. They can be the economic buyers, the ones that are paying for the product. They can be influencers, key opinion leaders, for example, or they can be end users, like I mentioned before, the surgeons. They can be sabotagers, and you should consider those too, because you can find resistance and learn how to go around it or to fix it, right? So if your product will find resistance, again, we'll go for a surgical tool. And if they might be potential resistance from the technicians, the OR technical staff, then you need to figure out how to address those kinds of resistances.
This point, Edna, is also very critical. If any of you are familiar with the hospital setting, you'll understand that hospitals are complex organizations and decisions are dispersed among committees and different members that have different interests. And so if your widget helps surgeons, for example, that may not be in the interest of other people in the hospital setting. And I'll give you an example. And I'll tie this in with one of the questions that Miriam asked that I missed while I was talking before. Miriam asked, do these values need to be described in a way, in a quantitative way? And that was referring to the value proposition. So let me set her answer up with using one of these examples.
And by the way, we will address that quantitative part later on.
Absolutely, but very, very quickly. So for instance, if you have a widget that saves OR time, that's brilliant for a surgeon, because that may provide them the ability to do more surgeries in a day because you're freeing OR time. But if you're only saving them 2 or 5 minutes of time, that may not add up to a significant amount of time for the OR. The other thing you've got to consider is the payer, the person paying for these surgeries. And if it's a public payer, like in the Canadian health system, there may not be enough budget to do more of these types of surgeries in the purse of the government paying. And so you have to kind of think about these in the context of a broader picture. So if there's a huge backlog of patients waiting for this surgery, and you can provide them a significant amount of time savings in the OR because of your widget, that's value. But if you're only saving a small fraction of time in the OR, and it doesn't add up to very much, then you will hit a wall trying to sell your widget to a hospital setting.
Thanks. That's a really good way to explain that. Another element for your proposal, you'll probably have several potential customer segments, and you have to choose strategically, who do I focus on first, right? In the total narrative of your story, in your proposal, you should address what we call the go-to-market strategy, right? And that means that you need to find who are the ones that you're going to start with, and it's typically you're looking for the low-hanging fruit, or the beachhead market, we call it sometimes. So here are some considerations that you could look into, and sort of to help you decide who you want to focus on first. It has to do with accessibility, with how excited they will be about your solution. Meaning, the bigger, you can have the same, you're solving the same problem, but for one segment, it's a huge issue. For another segment, it is a problem, but it's not their top two big problems, let's say. And so you obviously would want to focus first on the ones that will be just jumping all over your solution because they really, really need it. You need to consider size. So there's a tendency when writing business plans to think that you need to show a huge market right from the get-go. You do need to show a big market for your long-term plans, because you're going to be spending a lot of money developing the product, and eventually that money needs to be earned back. But it doesn't mean that you need to start right away from all the market or the biggest segment. Many startups actually should be focusing first on small niches, because first, small niches sometimes means that there's less competition there. Another thing that it means is that you can really hone in on specific needs of that niche. And so even if there's less members in that niche, you will be converting a bigger percentage of that niche to become your customers. So starting with a niche is always a good idea. And if you go to the Gyro Clear presentation, you'll see that they're addressing that issue. Obviously, we want to focus on customers that will pay, it will be easy to get their money and easy to access them. And you also you should be focusing on more, if you have to choose, on customer segments that are more open to innovation, because some segments are sort of more traditional than others, or resistant to new innovations than others. The next segment that we'll be looking at is marketing, and I won't go into too deep into this segment just because of lack of time. It's not how I'm going to sell the product, is how I'm going to get awareness of the customers, potential customers that even exist. And once I get their awareness, how will I, and they become my customer, how will I sort of keep them my customers, that I won't lose them? And then the third part is, okay, now I have my customer base. How can I use my customers to grow, even expand, and have either more customers or more income from each customer, right? So grow my my customer base. The best advice I can give you here is to look into examples, other examples of companies that are more advanced in your space, where they have maybe they don't have the same product, but you can relate to them with your model and see what they are doing and how they are doing that get, keep, grow portion of their business. Here are some examples of how to get customers. Of course, conferences and exhibitions. You can reach out through key opinion leaders and publications and obviously demos of your solution. To keep them, you can keep them interested by showing them, tracking with them and showing metrics of improvement of outcomes with your solution over time. You can add new features to your product or new modules, and you can provide a really good customer service that will keep them wanting to work with you. Examples of how to grow. Premium features is for the kind of a SaaS platform or the online model where you can add sort of access to more features and then the customers will be paying more. You can use all kinds of associations to try and incorporate your solution to be adopted in a widespread way with best practices and protocols. Phil, quickly, if you have anything to say on marketing, because I'm going to move on otherwise.
Yeah, just on the marketing, and especially in the med tech and health tech spaces. Obviously, as a startup, you won't have access to major advertising dollars, so it's more of a guerrilla approach where you try and influence a segment, your customer segment in a variety of different ways. If any of you have doctors as close relatives, you'll understand that they don't make up their minds unless they make their own mind. It's typically difficult to influence them as it is. Typically, they're influenced by the peers that they highly respect, and so the idea is to have a marketing strategy that really taps into the thought leaders in the space that you're targeting, and that is usually the critical path into getting traction for your device or technology. And so think of it as a way, if your customer segment is well defined, it'll be clearer for you how to access that customer segment, either through very specialized conferences, organizations, journals, study clubs, and you'll start understanding the connection between your customer segment and the strategy for you to use in order to reach that customer segment. Those two things that go kind of hand in hand when it comes to marketing strategy.
Are there any questions, Phil, so far that you want me to answer?
Not that I can see, no.
Okay. Okay, so we're moving on, progressing to distribution channels. This element is supposed to cover the part of the plan that talks about how you're going to get the product to your customer. Obviously there's more than one way, right? And it depends on the product. Is it only software? Is it also equipment, physical products? And obviously when we're talking about physical products, this topic becomes more complex, right? So the choices that you will make will affect, for example, the prices you can charge or the costs that will you'll be ending up paying for each product that you're selling. if you're using distributors, or you're selling directly on a website, if it's a software or a SaaS platform, you are using international distributors, then you need to, they need to take a cut too, right? So the distributors need to earn part of the price that will be charged for the products. Are you gonna be ending up in a partnership and a collaboration with big multinationals, and then you're selling them either the technology through licensing or the actual products, and they are taking care of the distribution and selling to the product? There are different models there, and whatever you decide will obviously affect the rest of your other elements of your business model.
And I have two questions that have come up, and I think it'll help demystify what we mean by distribution channel, especially as it relates to services. So I'm going to take them in reverse order. Cleo asked, "What is a SaaS platform?" And Susan asked, "How is this impacted if you're providing a service and are a not-for-profit?" So let me cover Cleo's questions first. A SaaS model, SaaS is an acronym for Service as a Software, or software as a service. Sorry, I got it in reverse. So excuse me, software as a service, and so it's the type of new service out there where you have a software platform that's engineered and built off of the internet and is distributed into your mobile phones that you can use as an application or just off your web. But essentially it's a way to distribute a service using the web as your platform. And you can monetize that. Good examples in the business world is Salesforce.com as a customer relationship management tool for those who know about CRMs. Now, how does the distribution channel affect service and nonprofits? It's very much in the same line. So if you're providing a service, typically you still need to reach your audience through a web channel or find a way to send out communication, bring back information, deploy your service wherever it might be. So you will need help, whether it's virtually in a software setting. You'll need web access, you'll need a server to deploy your services, and if it's a physical service where you deploy people, you'll have to pay those individuals to go out into the community and help the patients out there, whether it's profit or not profit. So your distribution channel is essentially the way that you interact and access your market. Yeah. And so whether
there's a hidden assumption here that we might, we're not saying, but it was sort of obvious to us, but it might not be obvious. This business model is meant to build a business plan that's scalable and can reach the whole world, basically, in theory, right? You can start, so it's more of a, or all of Canada, or typically in the healthcare world, it's not enough all of Canada, because Canada is too small of a market. But even if you're giving services, your business model needs to show how you're going to deliver those services, even if they are on another continent.
Exactly. So in the case, let's say your service requires nurses to go take blood samples from patients. Well, how do your nurses get to the patient? Do they use their own personal vehicles? Do you have a fleet? Do you ask your patients to come to a central location? So then you have to pay a rent. So there's all like it's really trying to answer the question: how will you distribute, or how will you deploy your service or product to your customers? How will they access it? And that's essentially the link between your business and your customer.
I'll move on. Revenue model. So we're going to address more of the, you know, the financial sides in the next workshop. But just to give an overview of this element in the business canvas is obviously you're focusing on the money that you will get, that will come into the company based on your activities, your services, or the products that you're selling, right? So there's a whole element there of figuring out what kind of model do I want? And there's a lot of acronyms here, and this, you know, you're not supposed to know all of this. You know, B2B means that you as a business are selling to another business. It's business to business. That's the B2B. Or you as a business are selling to a end customer. So that's the B2C. Are you selling to the government? That's the G. You know, are you gonna be selling a product which is like a capital equipment sale? Or are you gonna have the model of after selling capital equipment, you're gonna sell disposables? So by the way, that's a good way of how to keep and grow your customers, right? Because you're continuing to sell them disposables after you sold the first equipment. Again, SaaS, so Phil explained what a SaaS platform is. So there's different models and you're gonna decide which ones you're gonna be focusing on and and then put numbers to that model. And about the numbers, we will talk about it more next time. So here are some examples, you know, online subscription for a SaaS, so SaaS model, so you can be charging $10 per user per month. You could be selling equipment that costs $100,000 per unit, and then have disposables for X amount of dollars per X amount of units, and so on and so forth. So these are just a few examples. Phil, any questions about?
The only thing I'd say here is this has to do with how much you charge your customers for your service or for your product, and so you have to think in terms of what kind of value you're delivering them. What is their current cost of the status quo solution that they're using? What is the cost of the products or services that your competition will be charging? So they're all kind of data points where you have to assess where you want to play, whether you want to be a premium product or service or a very low cost service or product, and you need to figure out where you're going to position yourself in terms of pricing and how much that will influence your revenues, the sales that you generate to pay for the product or service that you deploy.
Now, don't think that you're supposed to know right away the final answer. Things will change. But again, what you're putting in your model today needs to make sense based on the information that you can know today, right? So if you're going to tell us that you're providing a product and you plan to sell it for $100,000 a unit, but we know that there is a comparable on the market that sells for $20,000, we will challenge your business model, right? It doesn't make sense, right? And so you take all the information that you can find today and you present a model that makes sense, a narrative that makes sense, right? Obviously, this is not your final version. There's going to be evolution over time of your business and your business model. Here again, Phil talked about those things. Some of the considerations you need to think of for, again, comparing yourselves to competitors or comparables, and there's always a way to do what you are offering, but in a lesser way. So for example, if you're going to the gyro clear example, it's not that they don't have a way of cleaning the scope, But so you can, they just take it out and they clear. And there's even products in the market that offer some kind of cleaning to the lens or to the scope. But so you can calculate or figure out how much these alternatives cost, and then it gives you a good idea of the range of the pricing that you're talking about. Reimbursement is a whole complex issue on its own, you know, and then in the US it's different than in Canada, but reimbursement codes can put a cap on how much you can charge for your product. And obviously, again, when you're dealing with numbers, you're not looking only at the local market. You're looking at the full potential of all markets globally. Key resources and key activities. Again, I'm going to run through this quite fast. But when we're talking about resources, we're typically focused on these 4 types of resources that you will need in order to make this business model come to life, right? In the best way you can. So there's physical, intellectual, human-related sort of, you know, employees and people that you need to work with, and financials. We're not talking about just general resources, but the ones that are unique in order for you to be able to manifest your plan, right? The ones that are key and crucial for your plan. Same thing for key activities. What are the crucial activities that you need to do in order to execute on your plan, right? And here are some examples. You will see in GyroClear, for example, they're providing these key activities along a timeline, right? And they're showing what will be the outcomes of each one of these activities over time. And they're obviously not putting out all the activities, but the important ones. Again, so the narrative makes sense altogether. Phil, anything, questions that are being asked or something that you want to add for these 2?
There are no questions, but in terms of activities, think of them as key milestones. What needs to happen for your service or product to come to market? And so if it's a medical device, for instance, what kind of regulatory pathway will you need? What kind of clinical studies will have to be achieved to get into the market? Because obviously no one's going to start using your device unless it's fully approved by either Health Canada or the FDA. So you got to think in terms of regulatory. You got to think in terms of quality. If you've manufacturing a piece of hardware, and you've got to think in terms of your the proof points. What do you need to prove out to make sure that your device delivers exactly what you claim it delivers? And so think of it as major milestones in your business plan. Those are the key elements that along the path before you get to commercialize that you need to nail down. And so those are, you know, it's a key aspect of your business plan and the proposal that you submit for this contest.
The other point I want to bring up here is that as I wrote at the bottom here of the slide, the activities are linked to your value propositions and costs and other elements in your model. So I'll give you an example where it's important. So when you're defining what your product is, and you want to focus on who the first customer is, and so you'll be focusing on a specific beachhead market or low-hanging fruit. Because you'll be focusing on them, maybe certain elements in your solution would be more important than others as what we call the first viable product, meaning the product that provides enough value to turn into a product that people will want to pay for, right? You might have more advanced versions over the time and add more features and add more modules or more elements to your product, but these activities and the resources that you'll be choosing need to be in concert with the choices you're making of who your customers are and what is exactly the most important value that you want to bring those customers, because that will determine what's the product that you need to develop, and so what are the activities you need to achieve, and what are the kind of resources you need. And that will obviously, all of that will influence how much this will cost you, right? And how much you'll be able to charge. So as you can see, all these elements are linked together into one story. Phil, are there any questions?
No, we have about 30 minutes left.
Okay. We're doing quite well with time.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's another element that is very important in the world of clinical innovation, because it's a very complex world, the healthcare systems and the healthcare market. And typically, a startup cannot make it on their own. They need partnerships. They need people and entities to collaborate with in order to turn whatever they're doing into what we call 10x, a much better model that stands out against competition and is successful in the market, right? The amounts of resources that you'll need will require a lot of money and a lot of expertise and reach into a very vast and complex market. So all of these you can't address on your own. You're gonna need partners, you're gonna need collaborators. And that's an important part of your business model. So here are some examples. We're talking about, specific multinationals. I don't know, GE Healthcare, and then again, it needs to fit into your plan, and it needs to make sense also that GE Healthcare will want to collaborate with you. So when there's partnerships, there's a dual relationship. It needs to make sense for the partner as well. You want to work with leading clinics in a certain field, right? To bring a validation to your product, to test it, and to have the backings of key opinion leaders in the market to convince physicians to use your product. Phil, do you want to give other examples or other comments about this?
Yeah, just briefly, and this is one that for your business proposal for the CLIC competition is something that you have to think about and be conscious of, because it's not something that you can't just throw out a name and say, "We'll partner up with GE. They're a good target." You really have to understand in what context your service or product will shape the future, and you have to kind of project yourselves out in the future and imagine, okay, well, who will be part of this new future, and who do I want with me? A lot of times when you're in a startup, and again, like I'm guilty of this, but you're shy, or you work in isolation, and you don't want to share your potential idea, a business idea or service or product idea. And from an IP protection, that makes sense, but from a strategic perspective, that doesn't make sense. You need a village to build your startup. You need experts around you that will advise you and provide you with whether it's the clinical input and the clinical expertise, or market, a vast global market. You have to understand that you can't do this alone, and you will need to partner with people, and you will need to seek out their help at some point in time, either early or later. So you have to kind of approach this with an open mind, And don't filter and don't limit yourself. Think big here and say, if in an ideal world, who would I want around my table to help me get this to market? And start with that point, and obviously see who you can get supporting you. And you'll find that if your idea, your business idea, your product idea, your service idea, if it's important enough, you'll have no problem engaging an audience. You'll have no problem engaging experts willing to help you. Whereas if you can't formulate the value, if you don't quite understand the benefit, if you're kind of gray on what customers you're trying to target, then you're going to kind of dilute yourselves and you won't grab the attention of the experts that you need around you. So like Edna said, this is all part of a puzzle, and the key partnerships is kind of like the capstone on it all. So when you're thinking of partnerships, think wide and big and high, and really challenge yourself to say, like, if I really want to do this, if I'm really serious about doing this, who do I want around me advising me on what to do, and seek out those experts.
I was trying to look if there's any questions and I messed things up. So
there are no, unless I'm mistaken, there are no more chat questions.
Guys, this is the time. Ask if you have questions.
Don't be shy.
Yeah. So again, to summarize some of the things we were talking about here, obviously you're looking for strategic partnerships. We're not talking about partnering up with a company that will, I don't know, do our brochures, right? That's we're talking about the ones that will make a huge difference in the success of your business.
Yeah, think in terms of advisors, experts. Don't think of them as service providers like design, graphic design artists. That doesn't really add value at this stage. We have one question from Fernando, who's asking, should we protect or build an IP strategy before reaching out to KOLs? And or before reaching out with advisors and partners. So I'm not a lawyer, so I'm going to state that right away. So don't take my advice. But from experience, what I would tell you is, whenever you're talking about your idea, your service, your product, a concept, talk about what you want to do, what you want to achieve. So focus on the what, not the how. That's like one key differentiation, because if you start getting into the science of how you do it, and the programming that's involved or the science that's involved, then you're giving away clues as to what you have in the black box. But if you focus in on the problem that you're trying to solve, and what you want to solve, then you kind of get yourselves out of trouble, and you can actually free up some space to have some really very interesting conversations with experts in the field without the fear that you're going to be copied. The truth is, if you're talking to an expert, an advisor, they're probably very well aware of the problem, and if they knew how to solve it, they'd have solved it already. So if you think you have a solution to that problem, great. You don't have to share how you plan to solve the problem, but you can share your energy and engagement in trying to solve it, and what you plan to do. That'll keep you out of trouble, at least in the early stages, related to IP protection.
And we're also, as far as I remember, the CLIC is going to provide you a specific workshop on IP. So that will be a good time to ask the experts on that specific topic.
Correct. We have Another question from Jessica.
Mm-hmm.
In a legal perspective, as a doctor for SaaS, do you have experience about having patients as customers? Maybe Jessica, if you can open up your mic and kind of clarify that question for me.
Yeah, do you hear me?
Yes, we do.
I'm not sure, I can't see anything right now.
We see you and we hear you, so go ahead.
So I just want to know if I want to develop, for example, an app for education or kind of that services for customers. And obviously I would try to, some of these customers would be my clients, maybe not all, but like the question I had is it like legal to do that? Because like, you know, as doctors, we cannot sell things directly to our patients. So
that's beyond the scope of this meeting. That's a question you should be asking the legal department or lawyers that specialize that. And as Jake is writing, it's something that will be covered under regulatory and other aspects in a different workshop. We're not lawyers, and it's too broad of a question for us to answer. But these are good questions that you need to ask the right people. We're not the right people to ask that.
Nothing left on the chat. Any other questions that we can field?
Okay, so I'm moving on to the last, the ninth element, which is the costs. And again, we're talking about main drivers of the cost, not every little thing, right? So what are the big item tickets that you're gonna have to cover with in order to achieve your business model that have to do with the development of the product, with your regulatory pathway, with your marketing, whatever you think the big elements. And obviously, there's a whole new other kind of calculation of how much you're gonna, you know, we're talking about margins of how much you're gonna earn net from each product that you sell. So if you're selling a product for $100 a unit, what's the cost of producing and selling that one unit? Is it $50? You obviously don't want it to be more than $100 because then you're losing on every product that you're selling, right? So, and there's some rules of thumb in that sense that people that have experience in the market, and again, you can compare yourselves to other products, and there's tons of information on it on the internet, what are, you know, sort of the margins that are expected depending on the type of product, if it's software, if it's hardware, if it's service or a product or a SaaS or whatever. So you have two elements in the cost part. Is the general operations and the again, as I mentioned, the costs that have to do with R&D and other elements like regulatory. And then there's the costs of the cost of sales, as we call it, the cost that it will cost you per unit to sell your product. And we're going to touch hopefully we'll touch on it a bit in our next workshop. So even if you're providing service, what will be the cost of integrating that service with the customers? A lot of elements there. So you'll need to almost simulate how this will work and then break it down into how much it will cost. Phil, do we have any questions about that?
No. Okay. And the only thing I'd add about cost is obviously for the proposals that you'll submit for the contest, you know, we might not be 100% accurate on or within the nearest dollar of the cost. That's not at all what we're probably gonna judge you on, but you need to have a sense, is your device or service going to be costing you $1, $100, $1,000, $10,000? You need to know at least at that level in terms of how much, and you know, that kind of rule of thumb should be able to give you a good guide in terms of you know, how close or how accurate you want to be in terms of cost. So we're not looking for complete accuracy, but just have a sense of you know, in what magnitude of cost you're talking about.
So just to wrap everything together and make things very, very clear, the tools that we provided you are not meant to be the chapters on your proposal. They are different elements that you need to figure out in order to have a whole picture and then be able to present a business plan with a very, with a streamlined narrative, right? And a streamlined story, which includes all these important elements in order to make the story whole, right? And if you go back to that same GyroClear presentation and you go step by step through it, you'll see that they are addressing, they are talking about the problem from the perspective of the customer segment. That's how they started their presentation. They are talking about what kind of benefits or value propositions their solution will provide their customers. And that's even before they explained what the solution is, right? And then they show how they will deliver those benefits through the presentation of what their product is. And then they go back to explaining the value proposition in numbers. So they're showing the size of the impact, right? Which is very important for listeners to understand, okay, what kind of problem, size of a problem we're talking here, and what size of an impact will your solution have on the market or on the customers, right? And they are talking not only about the direct users, which are the surgeons, they're also talking about the economical buyer, the medical system and the hospitals addressing costs, right? They are doing a comparative analysis to competitive analysis to other products that are out there in the market. And that's something we did not touch in this meeting. We'll touch it, we'll talk about it in the next workshop, but that's an important element that you need to include in your narrative, because your whole story is in context of what is already out there, right? You don't want to say I'm building a innovative solution, but then there's 10 other such products out in the market. So what's innovative about it, right? And who needs it? Because there's already solutions like that out in the market. So your whole assumptions of who your customers are, what your value proposition is in context of the ecosystem that your product is living in, right? What's happening in the market. And then they went on to show the potential of the revenue stream. So they do some calculations of their potential revenues. And then they continue to showing on a timeline their key activities and their deliverables. And they are continuing to talk about their marketing plan, how will they get and grow their customers, and explaining how they're going to distribute the product. So all the elements of the business model canvas are presented in their proposal, but it's not shown as a business model canvas. Am I making myself clear? Is it clear that what I'm feeling?
It's clear to me, but you should ask the audience. We should poll the audience.
Now, an important thing is that in order to have a compelling business model, you need to address the team that will make that happen, right? You need to convince the audience that there's a team out there that can make it happen, because it's hard. Not everyone can do that. You need to have all the skills that are needed, and if you don't have them internally, how you're going to get them externally, right? And that you have driven people that are multidisciplinary, working together to make that happen. And so the team is an important part of your story.
And then Cleo asked a question on the chat, which I think I'll address. Jake addressed it as well, but I'll just add my 2 cents on this. So Cleo asked, does CLIC or D3 help with not-for-profit product or services for patients? As you mentioned, there are costs getting out the service, and so we need funding. And so I would say to that, I'm not an expert in not-for-profits, but even not-for-profits need sources of revenue. And so it's important in your proposal that you identify how you will fund your not-for-profit. Because unless you're, as Jake mentions, like unless you're volunteering your time and just get a bunch of volunteers, that just covers the labor. But if there's a service component or a hardware component, a software component that you need to deliver, someone's going to have to pay for the development of that service or software or product, even if it's not for profit. And so you, in that case, you still need to identify sources of revenue. And that could be from donations, it could be from government grants, it could be from any number of different programs out there that fund your mission. But you have to be clear on where that sources of income will come from, because it'll just help your, obviously it'll help your business case. But it also will, as Jake mentioned here, it will assure that there is some sort of sustainability. You don't want to start something and have to stop 6 months or 12 months down the road because you've run out of cash. You want to find a sustainable manner in which to fund your not-for-profit. And so those methods of identifying where the revenue is going to come from are key in that type of business proposal.
And in context of your question about D3, D3 is an innovation center that if you decide that you want to actually build a business, whether it is for-profit or non-for-profit, we actually have a stream that's specialized in social innovation. That's what we do. We help entrepreneurs to figure out their business model with a program that's called validation that runs for 3 months, and we then support them with other, and we included that in the slide, the kind of services we're giving: coaching, experts, access to important resources in the market, et cetera, et cetera. So if you decide that you want to build a company out of that, we're very much inviting you to come to us, to talk to us. And the CLIC will help you sort of with a deadline to figure out your original plan, and then decide if you want to continue moving with it forward and actually building a company and getting your innovation out there into the market. Phil, any other questions that, because
Jake, you wrote a message and I'm trying to decipher it. Anyone and everyone, you can define who is part of the company and who is peripheral, but as Philip said, the bigger the village, the better.
Yeah, so two chats up. Fernando asked a question. He's saying, when you write the business plan in the team section, do they include only the founders or include advisors?
Okay. And so the answer to that, Jake, is it's important to show that you can attract outside experts and advisors as well. So anyone that's involved in advising you, that's been involved in trying to define the problem that you're trying to solve, trying to quantify the problem that you're solving, or trying to advise you on how to get your solution to market, that's part of your team. So the broader your team, the better it is for you.
Any other questions? You can open your mic if you want. We have 5 minutes more for questions, and then we're turning it over to Jake.
Yeah.
No questions.
No questions. We
were so good and so clear.
So if that's the case, I'm just going to take this very squeaky toy off my dog. Sorry. And thank you very much. That was really good. It's very clear. And I hope everyone found it useful. I think also I'd just like to add, you know, don't be daunted. There was a lot of things here you possibly don't know the answer to these things. What we're trying to do is explain to you what you don't know, right? Because you've only got 6 weeks until the competition. You may or may not get a little way with some of these things. But if you're asked by someone who maybe has an awful lot of money and the capacity to turn your idea into reality, something about, your customer base, and you kind of give up, you don't even answer, you don't even understand what the question means, you'll lose a lot of credibility, right? So often we were getting questions about, what's your regulatory pathway, and people would just make up an answer, right? Because they don't know what that is. And while it's possible for you to find out, it's okay for you to say, we have not yet done this, and we're going to look into distribution because that's what we need the money for, right? It's just being completely naive is not okay. So that was really good. And so I hope you'll join us for the other seminars. The next week, we have Carmela and her colleague from a law firm, Bereskin Parr. Something they're going to cover in addition to, how do I protect myself, and how do I get intellectual property, and what's a trademark, and what's a secret, and what's a patent, and is the IP regulations surrounding software. A lot of people are under the impression that they can kind of produce medical apps and there's no regulatory pathway. And that was kind of true in the Wild West days of maybe 10 years ago. But now it's not the case. It is a medical product, and a lot of people now are doing AI and algorithmic application to medical data. So they will have an expert on that. So that'd be very useful for you. I believe Edna and Philippe, you would be open to anyone approaching you and coming to talk to District 3.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And there's a lot of help out there, and you need to get out there. And I think this village thing is very important. There are lots of people trying to help you. The final thing I would say to you all is this is a lot of work, right? Putting together a business plan. And if you're going to do it, I would echo Philippe's comment. You got to think big, right? You're not doing this for 100,000 or $500,000, right? Because you can earn that in a few years, right? It's supposed to be a big thing that's going to impact, if money doesn't do it for you, impacting a lot of patients should do it for you. Because people always undervalue what they have. They always undervalue what they have. They go, oh, I'm no good, I don't have. You're all as good as anyone else as producing great ideas. And you need to think in the future. I just read something this morning. The UK government is so angry that they sold, was it DeepMind, to Google in 2012, and they had no idea what it was worth, right? That they've just started to pump tons of money now into high-risk ideas to sort of stimulate the UK economy because they missed out there. And it's the same, your companies or your ventures won't come into fruition for some years, and the world will not be the same. COVID will have finished, I hope. We won't care by the time your companies come out. It'll be a different world, and you need to think in the future and be as big thinking as anyone else. So on that note, I'd ask you please to fill out the closing poll so that we can use that feedback. Thank you again, Edna and Philippe. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
See you next week, same time.